This being the first meeting of this course, what I want to do is to give you preparation in terms of the syllabus, together with some introduction to the aesthetics of film, which is the basic subject matter within which our activities will center. Then, after we've done that, we can start immediately with the first of the films that are going to be shown. On most of the days that we meet, there will be a film, and it's indicated after the slash on the syllabus. What occurs before is the preparation that you should have done by then, consisting in writings of different sorts that I will be explaining to you. And in fact, perhaps I should start with that kind of explanation. Does anybody have any other question first? All right, well, look at your syllabus. And you'll see the first date today, Introduction, Sturgis' Lady Eve. The Lady Eve is a film that was made in 1941 by a great filmmaker whom many of you, maybe all of you, have never heard of. He was sort of a twin brother, I would say, of Orson Welles. Citizen Kane was made in 1941, and this was made in 41. They were both very literate, very highly educated filmmakers who had revolutionary ideas of a parallel sort. Sturgis was originally a businessman who decided he wanted to go into the movies, and he was also a writer, so he began as a screenwriter. He did well and was given an opportunity on a film in which he insisted that he be allowed to direct, which was rare, in fact unheard of, that a writer should also be a director. He not only directed that film, The Lady Eve, but he also wrote it, and in a way that was really very novel. Instead of putting it down on paper, he would sort of live it, reenact it, and a secretary would take down his directions about what should happen in the screenplay. So all of that was very new and very interesting. Orson Welles went, you probably know this story a little better, went to Hollywood at the age of 25 because he had attained worldwide fame or notoriety because of the Martian invasion scare on radio. He gave a radio program that alleged to be a report of an invasion of the Earth by Martians. And it was done so realistically that people fled out of their homes, and there was a great deal of turmoil. The next day, the news of this was all over the world. At that time, Orson Welles was 23 years old. At 25, he went to Hollywood and was told he could do anything he wanted with a movie that he would somehow be responsible for. And what he did was to produce the movie, to direct the movie, to write the movie, and to have the leading role himself. That was Citizen Kane, and it was recognized by the critics as a great work of art, but it was ruined at the box office because it was partly a parody of William Randolph Hearst, who was an owner of many newspapers and who wanted to destroy it, even offered to buy up the prints so that he could burn them. Wells's masterpiece survived, but lost money, and was the beginning of his ruination at Hollywood. All of this happening in 1941, which is very interesting. In the case of Sturgis, he went on to make other movies, and some of them are very good and very famous. But after a short period, maybe 10 years, his popularity peaked, and then he too declined in the eyes of Hollywood the way that Orson Welles did. They were both rich boys, or children of fairly rich people, They both had the best kind of European education and familiarity with American arts of people, mainly in the Middle West, who were doing important things but related to European models. They both had very strong-minded mothers. They were very much alike, and they liked each other, very much alike in many ways. But Wells never made the kind of comedies that Sturgis did, and what you'll see today is a very rich madcap comedy that similar in some ways to the ones that were commonplace in Hollywood in the 1930s. They stopped being made not too long after Sturgis. I suppose during the Second World War they came out of fashion. I believe that Sturgis is perhaps one of the very best that were ever made, and that it's a masterpiece, which is one of the reasons I wanted to start the course with that. And what I'm going to ask you to do is to just sit back and enjoy this comedy today. I don't mean you should be completely mindless or not think of anything else. You can think of anything you want, but just go to the movies today. Next week, I will play you the voiceover commentary on the DVD, which has recently come out. The commentary is made by a film scholar named Marion Keene, and I was attracted to this after having seen the original movie many years earlier, mainly for the bonus material, and intrigued by the fact that this was a woman's point of view, since she was a woman filmmaker. And that's really the great strength of it. There are things that she could see as a woman that I couldn't see. I learned a great deal from that, and it's all relevant to what's going on in the movies. So the commentary is a valuable work of art in itself. At the same time, I realized from that there are many problems in aesthetics that Marion Keene wasn't handling as I would, and her mentor at Harvard, a philosopher of film named Stanley Cavell, whom you'll be reading about for next week, that she appropriated some of his ideas that I don't agree with, so that I did have a different sort of perspective. On the basis of that, and this rich experience with the movie and with the bonus material, I sat down and wrote a 50-page chapter, which I won't inflict upon you, but while you're watching the commentary next time, I will give a commentary on the commentary. And of course, both of them are related and derivative out of the movie itself, which you're going to be watching today. The reason I'm doing it this way is because I think one has to learn how to look at movies. It's an art form, and you have to be trained in how to see any art, whether it's painting or music, which the music in particular being a very abstract art, and so you need quite a lot of training, or literature, or the doing of philosophy, which is also an art form. And this is something you probably don't have. Am I right about that? Does anybody have any? Has anybody taken the film experience? Well then, oh, half, that's good. Well then you got, you too? Did your hand, was your hand? No, it's about half. You have some preparation, but the film experience is more like a survey, and it's given by people in various fields, none of whom is a philosopher. In CMS, I am Comparative Media Studies, I'm the only philosopher on the team, and even in philosophy I do things in a bizarre and special way of my own, so that there is a certain way of learning something that you might be able to get from me that you wouldn't get even if you've had a good deal of experience in film courses. All right, so that will keep us occupied for the first 2 weeks, and I will put those 2 weeks and the rest of the syllabus in the context of this course as opposed to other courses that I give. For instance, last term I gave a course called Philosophy of Film, rather than Philosophy in Film and Other Media. And there I dealt with more abstract ideas about film theory. I did it, however, on the basis of a book that I had just finished last term, and which is coming out any day now, called Three Philosophical Filmmakers, Hitchcock, Wells, Renoir. And what I wanted to get out of them was the suggestiveness of their theoretical writings in connection with their actual practice and their views about the world and everything. In other words, as if they were applied philosophers whom nobody has treated seriously the way I did, and who is going to be approached by somebody who calls himself a philosopher, me, an aesthetician, that is, a philosopher of art. That was what I did in philosophy of film. In this course, I do something very different, and I'll have to explain to you what that is. At this point also, I want to give you a little explanation of what my input is. In the last Tuesday, the open course where people filmed the course that I give called Feeling and Imagination in Art, Science, and Technology, and that deals with the nature of creativity. And I began there with an account of what I am as an instructor. And it went on very long. I watched it last hour, and I don't think we have enough time for that today. So I will try to be very brief, and it's based on a distinction I make between born teachers and performing artists. And I give as an example one of my daughters who teaches 4th grade, and she's a born teacher. She can see into the soul, so to speak, of her young pupils to see what their stage of development is, where they are going. She doesn't give them impart much information, though she knows various things, including mathematics, which is specialized information. But she is able, through the question and answer procedure that's used so much in the lower grades, to get them to think and to work at what they're capable of given their stage of development. A born performer, which is what I am, is very different. I don't have that intuitive powers that my daughter does. I'm not a born teacher. What I am is somebody who is willing to make himself available and show himself forth the way an artist would, so that an artist coming to a painter coming to a white canvas doesn't think, well, you know, what is my audience going to be able to understand? How can I help develop their mind? He's expressing himself, his ideas of the world, based on his technical mastery of the tools of the trade, what it is needed to be a painter of one sort or another. Well, that's the kind of thing that I do, and it works very well with MIT students because you're all so smart. You can see through me very quickly, and you can pick and choose what it is from my work of art that would be relevant for you to learn whatever it is you want to learn. And that's, for me, the key to education, learning from somebody you respect, the ability to teach yourself whatever you care to learn. And that is the service that I try to provide. So that the reason I'm choosing the material that we're going to be doing in this term is directly related to my own creative work. Just as I said, last term's philosophy of film was related to the research and writing I was doing on the book Three Philosophical Filmmakers, so too this term is geared to the thinking, the viewing, the research the writing that I'm doing for the book. That will be, I hope, the sequel to Three Philosophical Filmmakers. It's a book on the nature of creativity. Not creativity, that's the other course. Nature of myth-making in film. And I'll explain to you just what I mean by that. As in everything I do, it's up to you to decide what you want. But my confidence is that once you've been pointed in that direction and have an example of somebody that you can attack, criticize, learn a few things from, that you can use in your own way, you will develop ideas of your own that will be very valuable to you. That's the correct approach to someone like me, and I think MIT students are uniquely capable of putting it to your advantage. Let me now go back to the syllabus. As I said, the Lady Eve is related to this chapter of mine that will belong in the book that I'm calling tentatively Film is Mythmaking. But I won't read you the chapter, and I certainly won't try to cover all the material in 50 pages since it's so long. But it'll come out of me, and then you can decide how to put it, to do with it whatever you want. Next week, I'll ask you to read a large part of a book of mine that goes into the aesthetics of filmmaking and preceded Three Philosophical Filmmakers. Came out in 1998, I think, and is now in paperback, so it's not expensive, called Reality Transformed, Film as Meaning and Technique. You can find it at the MIT bookstore on Main Street. You can find it at the MIT Coop. I want you please to get it and to read it for the pages that I've indicated on the syllabus. When I say get it, I don't mean that if you can get it, find it in the library or sit in the Humanities Reserve Room, that wouldn't be adequate, provided you actually do read it. All I care about is that you begin your preparation by digesting what's on these pages. The pages that I've listed are all theoretical material, very readable, I hope, but still in theory of film from the point of view of the problems that interest me the most. The book itself also has chapters from 3 exemplary movies that illustrate many of the ideas that I have, so it wouldn't hurt for you to read the book right through. It's not terribly long. And there are films that you might want to look at and eventually possibly write your papers about. I also analyze them. I don't use them as examples of what my thinking is. I analyze them as works of art from my own point of view, but they fit in to the theoretical analyses that precede them. One of them is Woody Allen's Purple Rose of Cairo. Another is Death in Venice, a movie based on Thomas Mann's novella. And the third one is Rules of the Game by Jean Renoir, a great French filmmaker. All right, so that's what you will be reading for next week. And with that sophistication, which you will immediately have, I trust it, I predict it, I know you all, you will immediately become very sophisticated in these areas. And the experience of seeing the Lady Eve and then seeing and hearing the commentary, you will already be molding ways of appreciating and experiencing critically the works of art that are called films and that we'll be working with throughout the rest of the term. Does anyone want to make a comment to this point? All right. the next thing to say is, well, but then what about those? How have they been put together? And what is the idea, to begin with, of philosophy in film and other media? How can you have philosophy in film? Until maybe 15 or 20 years ago, the idea that film was a respectable art was not accepted by most people in the academy. There were few, if any, departments of film studies. Many people said, no, you go to the movies to have a good time, to enjoy yourself. You do that on your own. You don't pretend that that's part of becoming educated, whether you're at MIT or some state university. Education means acquiring formal knowledge or taste, if it's arts, of a sort that have traditionally been imparted in the arts and sciences, and film never belonged to that, right? I've done a lot of work on a great American philosopher named George Santayana. He wrote about the ontology, that is, the being of the photographic image, which you'll be reading about in one of the first chapters of Reality Transformed. And he said it's not an art. It's not an art equivalent to poetry, sculpture, painting. Those are based upon flights of the imagination, whereas in the case of photography, all you're doing is capturing some reality. And if there's any art, it's the art of posing. Somebody sitting for the photographer has to know how to pose, and the photographer has to have some artistic sensibility about how to tell people to pose, right? But it's not an art form itself, comparable to what he called the ideal arts, the fine arts. Now, we've got far beyond that. But the question is, have we got far enough to see what it is to have philosophy in film? There are very few departments of philosophy in this country where anybody teaches what I teach here and what Cavell used to teach at Harvard. He's now retired. On the basis of the premise that there is some philosophical content and burden, and even maybe a message. Well, doesn't have to be that gross, a message that sounds like propaganda, but some philosophical inspiration present in great works of film art. That's the thing that I'm now able to do thanks to the development in film studies that has been taking place. And film studies, as you know, if you've taken anything else in CMS, is very comprehensive and has all sorts of varieties. My perspective within that panorama is as a philosopher. But it's a philosopher of film, and so I don't want to pretend that I'm going to find the works of Immanuel Kant or Plato or anybody in the movies you're going to be watching. What I want to find out is how can the movies penetrate to a deep level of our being to deal in their own creative way with problems that all people are interested in. Problems that may not be called philosophy, particularly nowadays, because philosophy has become very technical, but everybody would recognize as philosophical. So we use that word philosophical in that sense, the broader sense, and don't, unfortunately, many people just don't expect to find anything philosophical in departments of philosophy. It's as if they are highly trained people who have learned only how to talk to each other. Well, I'm not going to argue that case here. Now, all I'm going to say is that in many works of art, there is a level of philosophical profundity or relevance or importance, so that there is a philosophical content, and that's what I'm delving for. That's what my whole academic life has been geared toward, and that's what we'll be doing in this course. All right, so that's the philosophy in film, explanation of that, as opposed to philosophy of film. Anybody have any questions about that distinction as the basis of the two courses? Next question then is, well, how is it that films can be philosophical? Well, you'll get a good glimmer into that, the answer to that, by reading Reality Transformed. What I do in Reality Transformed is to engage myself at the very outset in a traditional problem of film theory, which is a conflict, a debate between people who are called, theorists who are called formalists, and those who are called realists. The formalists are interested in film from the point of view of the use of the camera, the nature of the cinematography, the technical developments that make it into the kind of activity and the kind of art that it is. It's the formal structure of the products of that artwork. I'll come right back to that. The realists are emphasize, no, film has given us greater power to capture reality than any previous art. And it's the capturing of reality that distinguishes the nature of that art form. You'll see by the time you get to the conclusion of that book that I try to harmonize the two. I reject either of them in their more extreme versions, but try to show that the two can be combined. So I think of myself as both a formalist and a realist. Let me give you quickly an example of the two types of theory. Hitchcock, in something you're going to be reading from April 12th. Hitchcock is a great formalist while also being realist. That's my point about him as to the others, that they combine the two, but he's a master of technique, and he says that himself in his theoretical writing that the nature of film is revealed by what he calls pure cinema. So pure cinema, according to him, is doing something that can't be found in any other art and can't be found in the world. It just consists of little snippets of celluloid, of film, being put together in the editing room, being cut up and shot maybe, indiscriminately, but even then he finally learned how to make the shooting in terms of the little snippets. Anyhow, they're going to be stitched together in the editing room, and you will get the impression that you're seeing something continuous, whereas really it might be the product of work that went on for days and consisted of many, many shots, but organized by the filmmaker. Now, this is utterly artificial, and it's a good example of the formalist approach. Do any of you know a famous movie called Psycho of Hitchcock's? Some of you must know. And it's famous, even if you haven't seen it, for the shower scene. That was very risque when the movie was made in the 1950s. Janet Leigh, the actress, famous actress, beautiful woman, enacts a character who at one point goes to take a shower. I guess I'm pondering to see whether I should ruin the movie for you about what happens. Something happens to her, let's just leave it that way, in the shower, and it frightened many people, was horrifying, and had a great shock, created fear on the part of many people. Young women reported that for weeks afterwards they didn't dare take a shower. And Hitchcock prides himself on the fact that it took place over a period of 5 or more days, and it lasts only 2 minutes, and that nothing really happens that is the whole point of that part of the movie, but rather it's stitched together so artfully you couldn't tell that. And he says that's what the nature of film is like. That's pure cinema, and that lives up to this formalist design. For realism, there's someone else you'll also be reading about, this more immediately in Reality Transformed, a great film critic and theorist named André Bazin, a French theorist, who writes a couple of essays and has written a great deal and is very important, very wonderful critic, but two essays in particular, one of which is called The Myth of Total Cinema, and the other which is called The Ontology of the Photographic Image, the ontology being a study about the nature of things in philosophy. And in both of them, he says that the importance of film is that it is part of the human desire to capture reality. And all of science is devoted to this, that it's an expression of our aggressive desire to capture reality, right? And science does it by getting more information, more comprehensive theories, that put us in touch with how the world is. And all of you, of course, know as much science, enough science to know that the idea of being true to reality is fundamental in the scientific approach. Well, Bazin's point is that has always been the human approach, and that various arts have attempted to do it, and that film is the latest step in this continuous effort based upon the latest technology that arose in photography in the 19th century and has developed further into the 21st century. He himself didn't live that long. He died at the end of, sort of in the middle of the 20th century. It's a function of technology giving us the capacity to capture reality in a way that nothing else, not in art, not in science, is able to do. Or so you see the two contrasts between formalist, like the example from Hitchcock, and realist in the example from Bazin. B-A-Z-I-N is how his name is spelled. And I try to get beyond them. Now, in getting beyond them, my idea is that films cannot be appreciated unless you savor and understand what they mean. It's not just a matter of their technique. The formalists are very wise and shrewd and informed about the nature of technique. But over and above technique, you also have the meaningfulness of the movie. And the one generalization that always runs throughout is that without technique, there is no meaning. And without meaning, the technique is just an exercise. It has no human importance. And so it's only when you see the two in their constant dialectic and interaction, the meaning and the technique, that you appreciate what a film is capable of. Now, particularly within the realm of meaning, there are many profound levels that film is able to bring to the surface and to use aesthetically, artistically, that I want to call philosophical. How do you get at them? Well, you'll see in examples from the exemplary movies that I have in Reality Transformed, my way of getting at them at that point. But what I wanted to do now, my thinking has developed, I want to see how it is that mythology has always been a philosophical effort, that stories, for instance, well, the greatest mythology is the Bible. If you're a devout believer, you're going to say it's mythology, but it's true mythology. That doesn't trouble me. I'm not concerned. I don't use the word myth in the connotation that it often has, which means that it's false. You know, if an advertiser says that taking this medication will make you live longer, a skeptic might say, oh, that's a myth. That's not the sense I'm using it. I have no interest in truth or falsity. I'm only interested in the myth as an expression of the human spirit, which is capable of being done in literary works, in film works, in other works of art. And in the case of the Bible, it's done in a literary fashion. The Bible is great literature, as well as possibly being the Word of God. I'm not questioning that. But in capturing the Word of God, it's always done by some artist, somebody who can write, and by means of creating things that have resonated, ideas, stories, doctrines that have resonated throughout the ages and therefore touch a very important part of what it is to be human. Now, when there is a story, what you have is a myth rather than a scientific doctrine, so that works of mathematics are not mythical. Works of physics are not mythical, though there may be mythical elements, in view of the fact that you can't picture the mathematics that goes into physics. And so you might say, the world is made up of particles or waves or strings. And this is all metaphoric. I mean, what do you mean, literally particles? No, no, they're waves. You mean like in the ocean? Ocean waves, or strings like a dental floss? I especially like the last one because that's so amorphous it can be almost anything. But that's part of the mythology of physics, and there are other aspects. I discuss all of that in my work on the nature of creativity in the other course. But here, what I want to know is, what are the stories that have meant so much to people, and how do they delve into levels of our being that can't be reached any other way? In the case of myths, we have the myths of love. Tristan, you're probably familiar with some of these. Tristan and Isolde. Don Juan, that's a myth that began in the 16th century, and there have been 500 or 600 versions of it ever since. Dido and Aeneas, which begins with Virgil's Aeneid in the 1st century AD, and goes through all sorts of variations. Those are myths of love, and they lend themselves to artistic treatment and can also appear in film. But over and above that, I felt that there are very ordinary terms and concepts that we use which require much more philosophical analysis and can also be shown to be the basis of myths and myth-making. Now, since this course is called Philosophy in Film and Other Media, and since I'm telling you that it all emanates from me as a performing artist, the question, whose philosophy? Well, it's always my philosophy, alas. I'm not going to be giving you a course in the history of ideas or the history of Western or Eastern philosophy. It's all mine, because that's all I can go by. I'm a creative artist, and what I create are my philosophy in the hope that they might be of interest to you. All right, so now quickly to jump to one of my recent books, a book that is assigned in the other course is called Feeling and Imagination, the Vibrant Flux of Our Experience. And it deals with the relationship between feeling and cognition, and feeling and various aspects of human nature, the first of which is imagination. So there's a chapter on imagination, there's a chapter on what I call idealization, by which I mean the human proclivity to make ideals. And this is something few people have written about, and I've written quite a lot on it now, and feel there's something I have to say about this. You know, what is it about a human being that shows itself so much in ideals? People fight and die for ideals. It isn't all material. It isn't all a question of what they can eat or the wealth and comfort they can find. They fight and live in terms of their ideals. Now, what is it to make ideals? That's the chapter in that book. And then there are other chapters, one, I'll stop there, called Consummation, that there must be some payoff, some reason why people have and use their imagination, why they make ideals, idealization. It's because it's fulfilling, it's consummatory. In ordinary American language, consummation is often used to refer to sex. A complete sexual experience is said to be a consummation. That's not what I mean. It is a kind of consummation, obviously, but you can have it in doing mathematics. There's something in your being which gets a feeling of completeness, fulfillment, satisfaction by really getting that problem solved right. The problem set, solving that problem set can be a great consummation, and sometimes more important than any other. That varies from person to person, situation to situation, and so on. So there's a chapter on consummation. All right, those are the philosophical kernels which I'm trying to, in the book on mythmaking, trying to explore in relation to film, and that's the core of everything we'll be doing in this course, except that I've only written about 100 pages of the book, so it's very fluid, and I'm looking forward to any of your ideas in order to strengthen my own, and that we can learn from each other. Anybody want to say anything at this point? Then let me continue down the list. I'm going to, you're going to be reading the chapters on imagination and idealization for the week after, in other words, February 23rd. And the movie you're going to follow is a very recent film that has won many awards and is very, very wonderful, I think. How many of you know Amélie? You know it. What a wonderful movie that is. You do too. Great. Now, when I saw it first, what struck me is that the cinematography, just the use of the camera, is out of this world. I came out and said, that movie's going to win an award for its cinematography, and it did. Was it at the Academy Award? Yeah. And so I was right once. For that time I was right. But what's occurred to me is that the whole basis of the movie is about the nature of human imagination. Amélie is a young woman who has a very rich, fertile imagination. I won't ruin the movie for you. You'll see what I mean. And so, having read my more theoretical account of the nature of imagination, and then watching the movie, we can see that that's the myth. That's what that movie, that's the philosophical level that is being conveyed in that movie. There are other movies like that. There's the one, Life is Beautiful, the one with Benigni that won the Academy Award. That's all about imagination. You remember the father and son are both Jewish and captured by the fascists. I forget if they're Italian or German, and put into a work plant as made slaves, and the little boy is so young that if anyone knew he was with the father, they would kill him because he wouldn't be able to do much work. So the father hides him, and the only way he can keep the boy from compromising their situation is by the father's using his imagination to deceive the boy into thinking this is a contest, and that whoever does the most work or something will win a prize, and so on. And it's the nature of imagination in that situation, which is what the movie is all about. And my question here is, what is the nature of imagination in itself? Right? Next week, the week after that, you're going to read a great short novel by a great American novelist. Some people consider him the greatest American novelist, Henry James. It's called Washington Square. And that week you will watch a very recent remake, or not a remake, a very recent filming of the novel. The week after that, you'll watch a film also based on Washington Square by one of the greatest filmmakers who ever lived and worked at Hollywood, William Wyler. It's called The Heiress, and it was based on a successful Broadway stage version of the novel. And you'll be reading me on consummation, because my idea is that one can't really understand what's going on in that novel unless we are able to approach it in terms of different perspectives related to what it is to be a fulfilled, satisfied human being. It's a love story of its sort. I won't tell you what kind. And the nature of that kind of love would be hard to understand unless there is some sophisticated understanding about consummation, right? We don't have much time before we'll be going to see the movie. After that, there's a very successful, famous play by George Bernard Shaw, a comedy called Pygmalion, which is based on a myth, the myth of Pygmalion, and you'll watch a 1938 movie, which was a stupendous commercial and critical success, and there's a lot that I'll have to say about that. And I've finished a chapter on that for the new book, so I have all sorts of things that I can tell you about. After that, I want to get back to one of the classic myths of love, which is the myth of Tristan and Isolde. Anybody heard that phrase? Do you know what that myth is? Do you know about it? Do you want to tell people what it is?
Well, that was the forbidden love between
forbidden love,
friends.
Yeah. Right.
Between, were they both religious, and then they were like a nun, and like in the Catholic Church? I thought that's what it was.
No, the Catholic Church doesn't come into it, but Tristan is the nephew of the King of Cornwall and goes in search of a bride for him. And when he gets to Ireland, he meets one. He's been wounded, and she brings him back to health. And because of the service that he provides to the Irish king, he allows him to a favor, and Tristan wants to have Isolde as his prize, not for himself, but to bring back to his uncle, the king. And on the ship, they, by accident, drink a love potion, and after that they can't live without each other. So the bulk of it is that she lives an adulterous life. She sleeps with her husband, the king. She also sleeps with the man she loves. And that's the question is, how can this be tolerated by society? So it's what it turns out to be a tragic love story, of which there have also been probably 500 or 600 versions. And I could have chosen other movies, but I chose one by a great French filmmaker and poet, a famous man named Jean Cocteau, whose version of the Tristan Isolde is a free adaptation of it, and that's what you'll be seeing that week. The week after that, I wanted to move a little beyond film, because the title is Other Media. In some years I've shown a fair amount of opera, or ballet, and people weren't that excited. It's film that is the great art of your generation, of our time. And so as a compromise, I chose this famous great short novel of Henry James, whom you will have known already because of Washington Square, The Turn of the Screw. It was made into an opera by the greatest English opera maker, except the second greatest, Purcell I think is the first, but in the 20th century, named Benjamin Britten, and a very talented filmmaker named Peter Weigel, I assume he's German or Austrian, Swiss, turned into a wonderfully imaginative movie. So by watching that movie of the opera, you get a foothold on the adaptation of The Turn of the Screw. And it's beautiful music, and I at least enjoy it very much. I never know how much your generation of people like opera, but I'm an opera buff. And anyhow, it's beautiful. The music is beautiful, and the cinematography is beautiful. After that, I'm going to ask you to read my chapter on Hitchcock as a preparation for a movie of his that many people consider the best of his movies, and some people consider the best movie ever made. I got an email message from somebody in Greece, maybe a professor, I'm not sure what, who said he had read on the internet about my new book, Three Philosophical Filmmakers, Hitchcock, Wells, Renoir, and he said he was very excited, though he didn't know what I do in it at all, and hoped that I had a great deal of material on Vertigo, which is his favorite opera and what he considers to be the great, not opera, his favorite movie and the greatest movie ever made. And I had to write back saying, I'm sorry, it's not a book about movies so much about movie theory in relation to movie, and Vertigo comes in a little, but not extensively. And then he wrote me back saying, it's all right, I'll read your book anyhow. So I thought, why shouldn't you be seeing it, Vertigo, together with a chapter on Hitchcock, which will help you appreciate it, I hope. After that, there is, I'm going to ask you to read a long short story by James Joyce called In Dubliners. The short story is called The Dead, and which was made into a movie by a very famous, important American filmmaker named John Huston, who made The African Queen and Treasures of Sierra Madre, all sorts of important films. After that, I want to show you the one movie that I consider the most philosophical movie, or one of the most philosophical, and the wonderful, great movie that I never cease tiring of. I'm sorry, the Xerox scene cut off the last letter of everything, and it's not the seventh C, it's the seventh seal. That's a pity. Could you write that in? Huh? Oh, it comes out with you?
Yeah.
Oh, it doesn't on the one I have here. That's funny. Oh, sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. Well, that's the seventh seal. As preparation for that, a chapter from another one of my books. This book is called Meaning in Life, The Creation of Value, and the chapter is The Meaning of Death. And since that's what this, two chapters, one called The Meaning of Death and the other The Love of Life, and that's what Bergman's great film is about, one of the supreme greatest films. And then for the last week, we'll see whether we should watch another movie or discuss your papers. We have very little time, and so what I want you to do now is to read with me the paragraph at the bottom. No quizzes or exams, but students are required to attend every class, whether or not there are conflicting exams or study groups and other courses, arrive on time, and do the assigned reading for each weekly session. Does anybody have a problem with that? You're not scheduling another course at this time. Attendance, lateness, class participation will be a factor in the final grade. Sorry to act like a disciplinarian, but it is important to get here early, on time, and every time, right? 2 papers are required. One is due April 12th, only 1,500 words long, as indicated by the computer word count on the first page, and consisting of analysis of 1 or more weeks' classwork on the list above, and scheduled up to April 12th, plus some outside research. We'll talk about that, and I'll make suggestions to you, and it should be effortless. If you've done the reading and you have ideas coming, you can do that first paper very easily. The second paper is a little more ambitious. That's at the end on May 10th, and it'll deal in a more original way with a philosophical theme as discussed in class with the instructor and approved by him. We will spend a good deal of time discussing that. Let no one worry about your ability to write that, because I will be here and working with you. And in the past, I've spent a great deal of time on email with suggestions and that students have. I mean, questions about how to proceed and the help that they want to get from me. I'm here for that purpose, to be of help to you. This is not, remember, anything you're being taught. This is a performance that is going to enable you to be a better performer than me. And so it will be your opportunity to be original, and I will be happy to coach you and to help you in any way I can. Now that paper is 2,000 words and also based on the computer word count, and both papers will be double-spaced just because I find that easier to read. Keep this in remember, sometimes people forget by the time the papers come around. And with a font of 14 points. In most font faces, that's fairly large, but not enormous. Any question about any of that? Okay, now, can you all can do this? And you all want to? I'm great. I'm glad. That's great. I'm glad to have you here. Now, since we have a little less, fewer students than we can accommodate, if you have a friend who wants to come in, let him or her get in touch with me, and I will bring that person up to date. Another 4 or 5 students would be very nice, but this is a good number, and I don't want too many. The room can't accommodate more than 4 or 5, but people always have scheduling problems, and if somebody wants to take this for whatever reason but is willing to do it in good faith, I will help that person. And then, as I say to you, he or she is expected to attend every class thereafter. All right? Also, there's room for somebody who wants to get in tomorrow for the second meeting of the other course, which is a seminar of a different sort. And if that person gets in touch with me, then we can work something out. Even if what the person really wants is film theory or so on, I might be able to accommodate that in the other course.